soon got transferred to Huntington Park. You want to tell a little bit about that? And then you had a new store, too.
Yes. The war was over and merchandise was becoming available. And I was transferred to Huntington Park, and this was an old store. But we had a very good business. It was quite a small store, too. We did very good business, and we could sell anything we could get.
How about your new store in Huntington Park?
Oh, along about 1950, we opened up a new store. I might go back to about 1949. Woolworth opened up a new store in Huntington Park, and it really hurt our business. But in 1950, we opened up a new store just a block away again from Woolworth, and it was very successful. We had a tremendous opening. It was very, very successful.
How about the fruit bar business? You carried a lot of outstanding fruit bars.
We used to carry fruit bars, and they come in raspberry and fig and apricot and strawberry, and they were really delicious. And we especially featured those fruit bars on a counter just inside the door. And we sold the complete output of this one company. And today, I think that was one of the big reasons why our store was so popular, is because of those fruit bars. And they were they were not very expensive either. I think they sold for about 15 cents a pound, or 10 cents maybe. It wasn't very much. But they were sure good.
How much money did you make at this time, since you were doing so well at the store with your fruit bars and everything?
Well, let's see. Going back to Inglewood store, I made there about, I began there about $3,000 a year, and I ended up about $7,000 a year. When I was transferred to Huntington Park, my income ranged from about $9,000 till about the time I left in the new store. I was making about $14,000, which sounds puny today, but that was good money in those days.
You were visited by one of the biggest wheels in the Kress company about this time, Mr. R.H. Kress. Want to tell a little bit about his arrival and what it was like?
Well, that was really something. Mr. R.H. Kress was a spoiled brat brother of the founder of the company, and he no more knew merchandising than the man in the moon. But he was there to throw his weight around, and he always traveled with a bunch of executives. But he came in the store with these executives, and he saw a sign that I had up over the candy counter. And it's kind of hard to believe that some executive and a man in that position would do the things he did, but he pulled that sign down, threw it on the floor, and jumped on it. And later on, when we were upstairs by the office, he went by our bulletin board, and we had a letter on there that was from a magazine, a merchandising magazine, that one of our trainees had sent a photograph in of a display that he had made, and they sent him a letter of commendation. So we were displaying this letter on the bulletin board, and he looked at it and pulled it off, threw it on the floor. He says, "Don't mean a GD thing." And then from there he went into the office, and I had by my desk some compartments that I placed the mail that pertained to different employees. And he saw that and looked at it for a minute and pushed it over on the floor, and he says, next time you get an idea of something like that, he said, write a letter to the New York office. And he says 9 times out of 10, it'll end up in the wastebasket.
Had a very positive attitude.
It was something. I'll never forget. After he left, the next day, the regional manager came around to see how I was reacting to all the antics, and he asked me what I thought about it, and I said, well, I just considered the source.
Tell about our Friday night family festivities, and we used to come down to Huntington Park.
Oh, well, that was real nice. On Friday night, the store was always open, late. And Lola used to come bring the kids and some food. A lot of times she'd have some hot stew in a kettle that she'd bring along, and we'd go out in one of the parks there in Huntington Park and have our dinner.
It was usually what stew was it?
Stew and bread and all different things, but we especially I enjoyed this very much.
A little break from the grind.
Yeah. I enjoyed Huntington Park, though. It was a real good store. It was successful and had good employees.
Not too long ago, you visited the old store in Huntington Park, didn't you?
Yes, this was about 1985. On purpose, I went over. I got curious to see what it was like. It was still a Kress store. And I went in there, and there was a girl that I hired in 1950. She was still there, and she looked just the same. And she recognized me immediately.
You belonged to a club, too, didn't you, while you worked in Huntington Park?
Yes. Which seemed kind of unusual for me, but I joined the... Exchange Club, yeah. I joined the Exchange Club, and we met once a week, and it was really a nice experience. They'd have speakers and different things like that. And we always had lunch together, which was fun.
And we moved to our new house on 94th Street in Morningside Park about this time. You want to describe that?
Yes, this was a much nicer home. I remember we paid $13,500 for this house, but it was a larger house, nicer house. We had living room, dining room, 3 bedrooms, and a bath. 1 bath. Still had just 1 bath, and I remember we had a floor furnace. It wasn't central heating. Well, it was central heating. It was a central furnace that came up through the floor in the hallway.
But it wasn't forced air.
No, it wasn't forced air.
About this time, you went on a trip to Seattle and British Columbia, which was a pretty significant trip.
Yes, this was about 1952, as I recall. We had a 1952 Chrysler. It was blue. But we went up to Seattle. After visiting around there, we went to Vancouver Island. We have pictures of Lola and the kids and the different attractions that we visited there. But that was really a nice trip. At this time, too, Queen Elizabeth it was the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. So there was a lot of to-do going on in Canada about that. It was interesting on Vancouver Island. the street lights all had flowers hanging down from them. Do you remember that, Larry?
Mm-hmm, yeah, we have some slides of that too.
It made a beautiful city. And we saw Bouchard Gardens, and I'll bet they're there today. And we went fishing too. Went fishing out on the Sound, some place called CQ. We didn't catch anything, but we had a lot of fun.
Family lost some people at this time. Mom lost her mother and father, and somebody else died, I think.
Yeah, almost, or Lola, I should say, her mother died in about 1949, and Lola's dad remarried again about 8 to 10 months later, and it was only a few weeks after he married that he died. So there was she lost both of her parents in just a little over a year's time.
You used to go up to Lompoc too at this time to visit your mother at Thelma's place. You want to describe that?
Yes, we went up quite often because my mother lived up there with Thelma, and we'd leave early in the morning and go up there, which from Inglewood was about, I guess, over 100 miles, probably about 125 or 30. And we would stay and visit during the day and then come back that night. But I especially remember the coming back and listening to the radio while we traveled. And over radio in those days, they had some real good programs like Jack Benny and, I can't remember all of them, but they had these real good programs, and we enjoyed riding in the car and listening to these programs. I might say that some of these radio programs are much better than what we see on television today, which are kind of lousy.
Did we go horseback riding up in Lompoc?
Oh yeah, when we went up one time to visit up there, we went out where Melbourne had his horses, and he had a horse and he had a mule. We didn't ride the mule, but we did ride his horse. He had a real nice horse, and we just rode it around near the barn there. And another time when we were up there, we went up in the mountains nearby Lompoc, and we found an old quicksilver mine. It wasn't operating, it was just an old mine. I remember Larry and Linda on this trip. Linda was just a little shaver.
What was Orville doing at this time?
Well, Orville and Melba, who had been really close to us all the time, they split up and married another gal, but it didn't last very long, and he was single again, and it was from the time they split up until they got back together again, Orville and Melba, was probably about a year and a half. They got back together, and they've been back together ever since.
This was during the Korean War, and I think some of our relatives were involved with that one.
Yes, Keith, that's Lola's brother, youngest brother, I might say, was called up during the Korean War, and he had to go to Camp Cook, which was right by Lompoc, where my sister lived, for training. I remember making that trip up there, and we visited with Keith. I remember Linda. The fact is, we have movies of this. I remember Linda flitting around there as she usually did. And I remember Larry also. But Keith soon after that went to Japan and Korea.
He came through it okay.
He came through it okay, no problems.
Your mother died too about this time.
Yes, this was in 1955. In May, as I recall, she died very suddenly. She had been downtown. She had walked downtown from where they lived, which is quite a distance. I mean, for her, it was several blocks. She'd walked downtown for lunch, and she came back and she had her home teacher there. And she was telling him about some of her early pioneer experiences. And she just became ill and laid down on the sofa or bed nearby, and she just died just instantly.
Well, that's a pretty good way to go.
Yes, it is. I got a call from Thelma immediately and said that she'd been taken to the hospital. But I got a call about 15 minutes later and said that she had died.
What store were you transferred after your experiences in Huntington Park?
Well, from Huntington Park in 1955, I was transferred to Oakland, California. And I left and went to Oakland. This is probably about April. I remember I drove up there alone, and I lived in a motel for several weeks, and until the kids got out of school. But in the meantime, Lola came up, and we looked all around to find us a house. And we found a house in Walnut Creek, which is about 20 miles out of Oakland. But I commuted from there.
What was the house like? Describe it.
Well, it was a new house, and I don't know what style it was. We altered it a little bit, changing the style. But it was out in the country. The back of our house was almost wilderness, and I know the deer came down and ate the leaves off the fruit trees we planted.
There were some walnut trees there too, weren't there?
Yeah, back behind our house, we had 8 big walnut trees.
So you had some very nice neighbors, as I recall, there too.
Yeah, we had our neighbors right next to us were the Dellas, and Dan Della was a principal at a high school there. And I'll never forget one time he came down, he had confiscated a joke book from one of his students. And we sat down there one evening reading that joke book. We had the time of our lives. But he was a real nice guy, and he still lives in that same house today.
You had a very terrible accident while you lived there. You want to describe that? Weren't you visiting Mom's sister in Vallejo?
Yes, we were visiting in Vallejo, and we were on our way home from there. And we were in a small town of San Pablo, not going very fast, about 35 miles an hour. And some drunk came over the double line. He was being chased by the police, and he hit his head on. And I'll never forget, there happened to be a doctor and a nurse at the scene of the accident. And I'll never forget listening to Lola tell those nurses and doctors how to get her out of there, because she was in real bad condition, but she was still telling them how to do it. and we were both taken out of that mashed up car, which was totaled, and taken to the Brookside Hospital in Richmond. And she spent 3 weeks there, and I spent about 10 days, as I recall. But she was really cut up. When we were hit, she headed out the windshield, but her leg caught underneath the dashboard, and besides getting cut on her face real bad, she splintered the bone, her femur bone in her leg, and it took quite a lot of surgery to get that leg put back together. I remember they put a silver bar on her leg and screwed it to the bones. And she was there about 3 weeks, as I said, and but she was in a cast for about 10 months.
Who did Linda stay with while this was going on?
Well, when we were in the accident, the Dellas took care of Linda. She stayed there until we got home.
That was nice of them, huh?
They were real nice people.
What were you doing at church at this time?
Well, I was, Lola had been the one of the counselors to the Relief Society president, and I was the superintendent of Sunday school.
She had to cut out some of her church activities because it took a long time for her leg to heal, didn't it?
Yeah, she did. It took about 10 months to get out of the cast, and I guess it took a year and a half to 2 years to get healed completely, because I remember when she got out of the cast, she had to wear a steel brace, and she was on crutches for quite some time. Long in 1957, the accident happened in 1956. Along in 57, we went to Los Angeles and were married in the Los Angeles temple. And she went through the temple on crutches.
Mm-hmm. She had some plastic surgery too done to her face.
Oh yes. Along this time, the company offered to have her come back to New York and have some doctor back there do plastic surgery. But I could never get any definite answer as to who was going to pay the bill or what they were going to do, and so I just went ahead and I arranged for a doctor in the Leland Stanford University Hospital, and he did the plastic surgery on her because she was really cut up and scars all over. When they sewed her, in the accident, her nose was cut off, and they sewed it back on crooked. So she had quite a makeover job, but this guy, I can't remember his name, but he really did a good job on her. And I'll never forget going into the room after the operation was over. And here she was with a mirror, taking a look and surveying the operation, and she was mighty happy. It was not too long after that the stitches were taken out, and that was kind of the beginning of her leading a normal life again.
You had a pretty bad earthquake too while you were in Walnut Creek.
Yes, we were at church, and when this earthquake hit, it really rocked the place. But I thought there for a minute the lights that were hanging in the church would come down, but they didn't. But as we went home, we went down through the main street of Walnut Creek, and I think every glass window in the businesses on that street were broken out. It was really something. But after seeing that, I went down to the store in Oakland, and we didn't have any damage there, no damage.
Describe the store in Oakland where you spent quite some time.
Oh, the store in Oakland was situated on the busiest corner in Oakland. It's at 14th and Broadway, and it was really a busy store. It was a 5-story building. We had 2 sales floors and 3 floors with stockroom and offices. It was an old building, but we did a good business. We also had a cafeteria, not a cafeteria, but a lunch counter in there, and we had 119 stools. So we did quite a business.
There was a policeman that sort of watched over your store. You want to describe it?
Yes, he was always out in front, and his name was Ralph. But he really took care of us. If we had any problems with a thief or somebody like that, he was always out there, so we just bring him in to help us. And he really took good care of us. And we took good care of him, too.
You had some pretty strange people come in there. Like there was one old lady that was pretty unique.
Yeah, I'll never forget her. I can see her today. She used to come in there, and she was kind of ragged. Used to wear a black coat, and she'd always come in there for lunch. And she'd sit down at that lunch counter and take her false teeth out and put them in the drinking glass with water. And then when she got her lunch, she'd gum her food with her gums, and the teeth would stay in the water. And she'd put them back in when she left. We tolerated her, though. She was there every day.
Give a typical description of your day in Oakland. What did it involve?
Well, in Oakland, we started out about 7:30 in the morning, and about that time in the morning, I'd do office work. But along about 9 o'clock, all the supervisory employees would meet for what we call a sample meeting. And at this meeting, all the new merchandise that had been received the day before would be on display. And we'd take one. We always had 2 samples of the same kind. We'd take one to the sales floor and make sure that a good display was made out of it. And the other one we'd keep in that room, and then each week, for 3 different weeks, we would inventory that item to decide whether it should be reordered. We'd discuss other things too at these meetings that pertained to the business.
Did you work any nights while you were in Oakland?
Oh yes, we always had to work some nights, but I always kept the attitude, that I wouldn't work nights unless it was necessary. Now a lot of men back in that day had a habit of working nights whether they needed to or not. But I didn't. Sometimes I was criticized for it, but I couldn't see any point in just working nights.
Larry and Linda both worked for you this time, right?
Yes. Larry was going to BYU at this time, but during the summer, both Larry and Linda would work for me. They'd work in the stockroom, I guess mostly in the stockroom. They'd mark merchandise or unpack it or whatever was needed. I don't think you ever swept the floor there, did you?
No, I never did.
No, we had unions in the store, and just certain people could sweep the floor. We had, talking about unions, we had 5 different unions in that store, and we had to kind of handle everything with kid gloves. but I never had any trouble. I had some good personnel girls, and they would handle everything for me. If any complaint came from the union, they would always go to the personnel girls, and the personnel girl would always say, well, I'll take this up with the manager and get back to you. I made it a practice of never confronting or having to confront a union man head on. I always let the personnel girl do the contacting. And this way, it saved a lot of problems because we could always say, well, I'll have to take this up with the manager and I'll get back to you. So any problems we really had, we'd get a hold of our San Francisco office and let them take care of it. But we didn't have any big problems. We had no strikes, no really difficulties at all. I did learn one thing, though, that the union men or people were interested more in the money they got from the employees than they were in the employee.
Well, that's too bad, huh? I got engaged about this time, didn't I?
Yes, this was, I think it was 1958. You were you came home after your third year at BYU, and I could tell by your attitude that you were hunting for a woman. So that fall when you went back to school, you met Phyllis, and by Christmas time you were engaged. And I remember at Christmas time you brought Phyllis home to visit us. And we were really pleased in your choice. We have a letter that Phyllis wrote to us. We still have that letter.